Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and this week we have Ratkin versus Elves. This battle was fought at 2250 points and the scenario was loot. Starting out, we have my opponent's elf army, which involves a contingent of forces of nature. First, there is a horde of 4 shamblers, followed by a horde of sylph talon riders, and finally a centaur chief with a bow. Next up for the elves, we have a horde of kindred archers with the heart-seeking chant, a horde of kindred tall spears, and a horde of Tyrrhenian sea guard with the wine of elvenkind. Then we have a horde of dragon riders, 2 ASBs, one of whom has the lute, the other has the diadem of dragonkind and a mount, and then we have an elven mage with Shroud of the Saint, and finally a mystical dragon kindred lord with no upgrades. As for my thoughts on the army, I think it's interesting. The forces of nature allies are good. I think that, you're picking out some of the best units they have to offer, but I'm not exactly sure what they do for this army in particular. But I don't know, maybe with some different deployment, it could go differently. But anyway, as for the elf side, I like it. I don't really like tall spears outside the formation, but to each their own. They seem like a fine unit. Next up, we have my new and improved Ratkin army, which starts out with 2 hordes of blight, one of whom has the caterpillar potion, the other has brew of strength. Then we have 2 troops of claw shots, a horde of shock troops with the brew of sharpness, 7 regiments of slaves, because you gotta have those slaves. Please don't take that out of context. Then we have a blight lord with bane chant 3 and critters call 8, a swarm crier with the lute, and a warlock with bane chant 3 and inspiring talisman. Next we have double death engines with vile sorcery, and then we have double weapon teams, both of whom have the storm of lead. So yeah, this is my current iteration of Ratkin, and it's just me playing around with them more. I like playing Ratkin, so I thought I'd put them down on the table, and I wrote a quick list for them. So moving on to the battle itself, let's talk about loot real quick. So loot has 3 loot counters. We've got 1, we've got 2, and we've got 3 right here. So the first thing you do is place 1 in the direct center of the table, and then each player, starting with the one who won the roll-off, places 1 of the loot counters down on the center line, I believe, or at least that's what we did. And then standard rules apply, have to be more than 12 away from each other, and have to be more than 3 inches from impassable terrain. So my opponent placed this one, and I placed this one, just to get us all crowded on one side of the table. Now, the elves do want to have a bit of a crowd, but I just thought it would be easier for pictures, to be honest, if I didn't have the Ratkin spread across the table. So, with that said, let's talk about the table a little bit. First off, in the far right, just peeking out, we have a height 4 obstacle. Above that, we have a height 2 hill, and then to the left of that, we have a height 6 forest. Below that, another height 6 forest. Then up here again, we have a height 3 impassable. Or I guess that house over there is not an obstacle, it's an impassable, sorry. Below that, we have a height 2 hill. To the left, we have another height 6 forest, a very forested table. And finally, we have another, I think we ran this as a height 3 impassable. Either that or we ran it as a hill, but I think it wasn't an impassable now that I think about it. Yeah, and so that's it for the terrain. Let's go over the armies. First off, we have my opponent's centaur chief with the bow, and then we have the horde of sylph talon riders, gorgeous model. This is the rock, I can't remember exactly, the Thunderbird. It's from Privateer Press. It's the Circle of Ouroboros, Gargantuan. Then we have the horde of 4 shamblers. Over here, these lovely riflemen, that is the horde of archers with the heart-seeking chant. This painted Ron model, that is my opponent's mage with Shroud of the Saint. This guy right here is the ASB with the diadem of dragonkind. The giant dragon is unsurprisingly a mystic dragon. Next to the mystic dragon, we have the Tyrrhenian sea guard kind of facing off to nowhere. It's an interesting deployment. Then we have my opponent's ASB with the lute. Finally, the tall spears and the Draken Riders over here. Let's see if there's another. Nope, there's not another picture of them. So yeah, the Draken Riders. Let's go on to the Ratkin deployment. So the Ratkin deployment, yeah, I know you guys, they were painted before, they are no longer. All those guys are on circle bases and gone. So starting anew with more Ratkin. First off, we have both of my troops of claw shots. Right behind them, sneaking around the woods, we have my Swarm Crier with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. Then we have the start of the slaves. So we've got 1, 2, 3 regiments of slaves. Behind here, we have my horde of shock troopers with the Brew of Sharpness. Then we have both of my death engines back here. In front of this death engine, we have my warlock with Bane Chant 3 and the Inspiring Talisman. Then we have the 4th Regiment of Slaves, the 5th Regiment of Slaves. Behind them, we have the 1st Horde of Blight, and that's the one with the Brew of Strength. Then finally, we have the 6th and the 7th Regiments of Slaves, and behind them, the 2nd Horde of Blight with the with Pathfinder. And then we also have the Blight Lord just sneaking around the middle. So yeah, always feels nice to field Ratkin. It's a little weird, but let's get on with the game. Oh, nope, sorry. Forgot about these guys. Got both the weapon teams over here with the Storm of Lead just holding down the flank. So now let's get on with the game. So turn 1. Turn 1 ends up going to the Ratkin. I can't remember if I actually won this roll or not, but either way, going first is fine for me. And we advance forward. You can see my opponent has vanguarded forward with the Shamblers. That's probably why I wanted to go first. On the left flank, we sort of fan out a little bit. I don't think that my opponent's really going to push on me too hard, and especially not with all these slaves mucking it all up. So, and if he does, I don't really care. This dragon wants to come in and fight slaves, go nuts. So yeah, we just sort of fan out there a little bit to get my shock troopers up. I make sure that my warlock is, so this warlock here is inspiring 1 slave regiment, but I'm not inspiring these, I don't think, and I know I'm not inspiring these because I don't like to inspire slaves. I want them either dead or fine, and inspiring just gives them an extra chance to be wavered. Not what I want. Yeah, so the shock troops are a little behind here. I might have considered pushing them, well, not the shock troops maybe, but maybe the Blight in front of my slaves for this game. My opponent has shooting, but it's not a ridiculous amount, especially with the Therenian Sea Guard sort of facing off to nowhere. I mean, they've got the wine, but whatever. So that's, what, 20, like 45 bow shots, and oh, I forgot about the Sylph Talon Riders. Yeah, maybe this was fine. But anyway, I move one of my death engines up onto the hill so I can shoot at the 4 Shamblers. It must be a hill, yeah, as he walked over it there. So to shoot at these 4 Shamblers, a bit of a mistake. I just kind of forgot for a second that these things are height 4, not height 3 for Chariot. So I was just trying to dodge cover that they didn't need to dodge. Then we've got the other one just turning to face him down. And on the right side, I push, or in the center, I push a lot harder towards one of the tokens. So I can move 12. The token is, so normally, you deploy slightly under 12, but a token's on a 25 mil base, so you can get to it. I run over, grab the token with these slaves right here. Then the other Blight just sort of follow up behind. These slaves get stuck in the woods, and this is what I meant. I definitely should have these Blight in front of the slaves, because these Blight have Pathfinder, right? And these slaves might be useful as token grabbers in the later turns, so bit of a mistake there. My weapon teams just advance forward. They don't need to push too hard. I'm just trying to make it so the Dragon Riders can't just fly over here and have free reign to come down my line. So that's what she said. But yeah, so I just have them over there to keep them honest. And moving forward. So here is the action shot. I do fire both the claw shots and the death engine at the Shamblers. I do all right. I definitely get the hits in a little above average, but my wounds were really bad. So I think I do 6 or 7 wounds total. Which is fine, because I've got, what is that? Let's walk a picture back. So I've got D6 or 2d6 plus 14 shots on 5s. Then I've got I've got 5 lightning bolt on 5s, right? And then these have pierce 2, this has pierce 1, and then I have 10 shots on 4s that wound on 3s. So 7 or 8 wounds isn't the best, but I'll take it. It's not a complete failure. I do fail to kill them, so they move forward. And here is turn 1 for the Elves. You can see that on the left here we have the 4 Shamblers coming into my slaves. Oh, it looks like I did 8 damage, so a little better than I thought. So yeah, they're going into those slaves. I don't really care. At the time, I was thinking that these shock troopers could probably squeak by even. So if I move the slaves over and then charge in with the shock troops, but I think my angling's a little wrong. I'm not sure I can fit there. But anyway, I don't particularly care if someone's fighting my slaves. You can see the Talon Riders move forward along with the Centaur Chief, just threatening my artillery over there. The Elves, of course, the Archers, of course, stay still. They've got their little heal wizard behind them, while the Draken Riders just, I believe they're about here, just reposition over here to face down this side of the table, as I think my opponent just sort of looked at the numbers over here and went, nah, I'm not dealing with that. The Therenian Sea Guard do use their Wine of Elvenkind to better place themselves, but I think my opponent was assuming that he could shoot over into these, and he doesn't get a lot of games in, so maybe in the same way that I was kind of, thinking this was height 3 for a second, he was thinking that these were height 2, just because I often play height 2. But I'm not. The dragon's getting into position to burn down my slaves, so not pretty there, but it's fine. And yeah, let's go into the action shot. So first off, these slaves do get burned by that dragon. They take 10 wounds, which is pretty wild, but then my opponent snake eyes it. So yeah, they've got the loot and they refuse to give it up. And here is an end of turn shot. You can see that, yeah, these rats did take 10 wounds. I took 9 wounds on my death engine, and that wasn't pretty. I just didn't think about the archers, and I didn't think that they were going to do 9 wounds for sure, because they do not get Bane Chant this turn. They just got the 1 pierce, but Death Engine's got that nerf to Death 4, which I think was actually pretty okay at the time. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, with stuff like the Steel Behemoth existing, why is this thing Death 4? But anyway, doesn't really matter that much. They're still pretty good. The other slaves take 7 wounds from the 4 Shamblers and hold firm. So, again, I kind of want them to die, but you get what you get. Turn 2. So turn 2 for the Ratkin. Of course, my artillery just sits here ready to shoot some stuff. I've got my slaves going in as a countercharge into the... what are these guys called? The 4 Shamblers. I do take these slaves, and they had an easy flank charge, but in my head I was like, oh yeah, I can just move them forward, and then the shock troopers will fit. But when these guys align, so I can align this over, and the shock troops will fit through. But this unit didn't go far enough forward to allow for that, and I just didn't want to do any takebacks, so I just go, well, my mistake, and the shock troops just get gummed up for a turn. So not the best, but happens. I take the Death Engine and I take it right off the hill. The slaves are not giving me cover from these archers at all, but I prefer to not just get shot by the whole table. So I take them off the hill, and then the other Death Engine, I'm not even sure it moved. Yeah, I don't think it did. It did take 2 wounds from something. Maybe the Sylph Talon Riders? I'm not sure what shot it, but something shot it for 2. Yeah, just getting ready to shoot into the big bird here, while the other one shoots the big bird as well. So on the right, on the other hand, I believe these slaves were in my way, and I waddled them over here just to go mess with archers, and then that allows me to get a charge or a combo charge, because the slaves that took 10 wounds past their yellow-bellied charge into the spearmen, along with the blight with the brew of strength. So that's pretty nice there. I positioned my Blight Lord here to go for the Critter's Call right onto these archers. It seems like the prudent time to do it, as this Death Engine probably can't take another salvo. So yeah, just getting ready for that. I take both of my my weapon teams and position them into the forest to shoot at this dragon, just hoping to get some damage onto it. They are an 1820, I want to say, with Def 5, so I'm not expecting too much, but it should be fine. I exposed the flank on these slaves, and it's because I needed to get them out of the way, but also because I don't care if the dragon charges me in the front or the flank. Dead slaves are the best slaves, right? I would love this dragon to charge these slaves in the front, because these blight will wreck him. Assuming that I get some decent decent damage off with my weapon teams. So that's what I'm going for right here. Let's see how it all turns out. Here is the end of turn shot. So starting on the right, you can see the big bird is gone. So the Self-Talon Riders, do get obliterated by the Ratkin shooting. So that feels nice. These slaves do a wound to the Shamblers, but they can't roll the 8 to kill them. So they just sort of sit there. And then finally on the right, you can see I pretty easily dispatch these spearmen, and it's actually a bloodbath. These blight just roll insane. I think I end up doing 19 or 20 wounds with them. It's crazy. And then the slaves add like a damage or two, a pip or two of damage. Seems pretty good. So yeah, they're gone. Actually, there it is. It's 18 damage from the blight. So kill off the spears. My blight lord does end up doing a damage or two with Critter's Call onto the archers, so no shooting for them. And then I manage a pretty decent amount of damage onto this dragon from my weapon teams, but I can't remember exactly how much it is, and the dice are hidden. So it's like 6 or 7, but yeah, I'm okay with those numbers. They're not rookie numbers, guys. It's good. And we move on to turn 2 for the elves. So turn 2 for the elves, mostly it's charging. So you can't see it, but off frame, you can notice that the Centaur Chief is gone. The Centaur Chief is charged into one of my claw shot units. So yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Then we've got these Shamblers going back into the slaves, looking to finish them off. I'm hoping they get finished off because I want these shock troops into the fight. So yeah, please do it. The archers decide to take a charge into my slaves. They couldn't charge these slaves because they'd either bump this rock or they'd bump my other slaves. So they have to charge into these ones, and they go for it. The Draken Riders don't really have a charge because the only thing they could charge were these 2 slave units, and they can no longer fit. So there's no reason to charge them in right now. I think that this is the correct call to send the archers first. So the Drakens just sit behind. We've got the heal mage getting ready to heal there, and the burn mage getting ready to burn these rats. So, seems solid. On the right, you can see the Theronian Sea Guard have gone into my blight. I am not worried about that, as I've got Ensnare, so whatever. And then the dragon, originally I think my opponent decides to charge these slaves in the flank, and I go, well, you could always charge a weapon team, right? You get triple your attacks. That's 30 attacks on 4s because you landed in the forest, but 30 attacks on 4s, I think I'm at 7-9 or 8-10 or something. I mean, I've got the rally 2 going on here, but still, my nerf's not great. So yeah, it goes into the weapon team instead. And moving on, here is the action shot. I do like the way this is looking. Pretty cool. And here, and here's double 1-2 of the game, which is my opponent gets these slaves up to 12 wounds and double 1s it again. So, I mean, it sucks that they got double 1s, but I want these slaves out of here. So it sucks for both of us, I guess, a little bit, probably a little more for him. And here's the end of turn shot, a little off, but yeah, so these slaves are still up. The slaves that were right here do get burned. I think my opponent does like 7 or 8 damage. It's pretty high, but slaves are only def 2, so and then rolls okay for the break test. They're out, but the archers do not fare so well, do not even manage to waver their slave fight, and then the blight end up taking 7 wounds, I want to say, from the Sea Guard. Now, I do know my opponent tried the loot. I can't remember if it worked or not, but still, 7 wounds is that's all right. I can deal with that. You can see, yeah, the weapon teams did do 6 damage to that dragon. And speaking of the dragon, it kills off one of the weapon teams. I don't even make my opponent roll it because, oof, it was, and I mean, 30 attacks on 4s, that's not the best. I would normally make my opponent roll it, but the store here was so loud that I couldn't even think, so I was just trying to work through the game as quickly as possible, to be honest, and I think so was my opponent. And that's the end of turn 2, so moving on to turn 3. Turn 3, yeah, so right here, I try to get these slaves, well, I don't try to get the slaves in. There's no reason to charge in. I want to shoot instead at the Shamblers because the only other target I really have as a logical one is the Centaur Chief, and he's both in the woods and an individual, and I don't have any of those fancy breath weapons over here, so yeah, the best target I have is the Shamblers. So instead I just sort of scoot these slaves over to get ready for the shock troopers so they can actually do something. And they just sort of sit there. I walk my warlock onto the hill. I'm really not sure why I did that. The best I can tell you is that it was so loud I couldn't even tell what I was doing anymore. But yeah, I walk onto the hill, getting ready to get shot. I send my slaves and one death engine into the archers. I'm not expecting to kill them, but get some decent damage onto them, and hopefully they can't kill my death engine in return, as that death engine does have 9 wounds on it. These slaves, I'm not sure where they came from. Oh, I know. These are the slaves that actually got charged. This is a yellow belly pass, because I take these slaves, I got charged by the archers, and waddle back to grab this token. And since I go 3 inches back and I was an inch away, these slaves can slide in after passing their yellow bellied and allow the death engine to charge as well. These slaves just continue their death march away, looking for tokens, looking for fat loots. I forgot to mention that the slaves that were right here on turn 1 that grabbed the loot had dropped it on turn 2 right here, and the Blight picked it up. So the Blight have the token now. So speaking of the Blight, they go into the dragon looking to nom that down. And the other Blight go into my opponent's Therenian Sea Guard, looking to end them. So if those 2 units are gone, the right flank is basically mine. All I'd need to do is take out the Draken Riders, and there's little my opponent can do. So that's the plan. Let's see how it goes. This is an end of turn shot, so you can't quite see it on the left, but I ended up charging into the Centaur Chief, I believe, with my Storm Crier. I don't really care too much, so I do nothing there. I do end up killing the 4 Shamblers though with my shooting. The archers take a couple damage. It's not actually that great. I think the damage is actually done by the slaves. The death engine just sort of poops itself. So nothing really happens there, but I do turn off its shooting. And the Blight here, so these Blight are the ones with Brew of Strength. And when they go into the Therenian Sea Guard, they end up doing, it looks like 8 damage. So that's not too bad. I mean, they've got 30 attacks on 15s and then 3s, or 4s and 3s. So 15 hits, and then, yeah, like, a little below, but that's fine. Now these guys are just champions, and they one-round that dragon. They do not natively have crushing strength, but my Blight Lord this turn just cast Bane Chant onto them, gave them the crushing, and yeah, they kill that dragon. So things are looking pretty nice on the right flank here, but we'll see what my opponent does in response. So Elf turn 3. Oh no, is this just the action shot? I think it is. So here's the Elf turn. So we've got the Therenian Sea Guard going into my Blight, just hoping to finish them off on a lucky roll. Now here is the, actually, this was the shot. I just skipped one. Now, this is an end of turn shot because I messed up. The archers here charge into my death engine and do like 5 damage. So yeah, they kill the death engine in one go. It didn't actually end up mattering 5 or 1 damage or whatever. They just needed to do something because my opponent rolls back-to-back 9s. Or no, not back-to-back 9. It's not inspired. So yeah, it just rolls a 9, kills it. The Centaur Chief that's over here has now killed both the claw shots, I want to say. Or, no, it's killed 1 claw shot, and then it charged into my Swarm Crier and did a couple damage, but did not manage to kill it or waver it. Now, the big mistake that happens is if we roll some pictures back, yeah, I put this Warlock onto the hill, and I am well within Draken charge range. So they charge, 1 round it, and then they hit the flank of my shock troops and 1 round that because I'm just that good of a player. But I'm going to blame it on the loud store. So, yep, the shock troops are gone, and now it's kind of a game. Now my opponent, I mean, might be able to just run rampant with these Draken Riders if things go well, but unfortunately the Therenian Sea Guard don't do so well against the Blight, so probably not the best game. But, or not the best chances of the Draken Riders doing that. The game's fine. And turn 4. So, turn 4 for the Ratkin goes about how I'd expect. First off, I run some slaves over to that token. I think these are the ones on 10 wounds from before. so just easy prey. I decide to take, oh, my warlock went onto the hill to try to snipe down this ASB. I did 3 wounds to it, but don't manage to even scare it. I killed it on the first roll, but didn't manage to scare it on the second. So anyway, I send some slaves into the flank of these archers and some slaves into the front, passing a yellow belly, I think. And then I take the swarm crier that was in the woods fighting against the centaur chief, and I just run behind my death engine for safety. So I've got the inspire over here, and I can't be charged by anything because I'm height 4. The death engine turns, I don't think this is the final placement. I think I take the death engine, put it more like this, and it just takes some shots into the Draken Riders in the end. On the right, you can see, yeah, this is a mess. So these Blight were in the flank of the Therenian Sea Guard. All I have to do is shift some slaves around, and I think the weapon team, which I do, and then they charge into the flank along with some slaves that were staring at the flank and a countercharge to the front. So those Therenian Sea Guard, if they survive, it's because I double wonded. So the Blight Lord again just moves forward to get some Bane Chant going. Actually a really competent fighter, but I just haven't needed it yet in the game, so just casting Bane Chant instead. And here is the end shot. You can see, actually my Blight ended up getting up to 11 wounds. So, you know, that's decent. But they kill off the Therenian Sea Guard, and that is not good for my opponent. And here we look at the table at the end of turn 4 for the rats. And it's just, it looks like I'm on this side of the table, right? Like everything's facing, you know, down these Draken Riders. But nope, we're just returning home after killing off all the elves. So we've got the Draken Riders, we've got the ASB with the diadem, the ASB with the loot, the heal mage. Oh, the heal mage did try to heal the archers and just failed all 6 rolls. And finally, you get to see the Centaur Chief. It's back. So the Centaur Chief is ready to charge. And we do turn 5. It looks like I skipped my opponent's turn there, but yeah, as you can see, my opponent's turn doesn't go too well. I believe the Centaur Chief went into the last claw shot, looking to just kill that off, and fails, I think. And then the Draken Riders decide to charge into the Wounded Blight, and with their 4+ to hit, they just can't get it done. But this ASB does fry the slaves with 10 wounds on them, so I can't get that loot token. Well, I could if there's a turn 7, or a turn 5, I guess. Turn 7, yeah. But yeah, that one's gone, and that's about it. This is my turn 5, so you can see I send the Blight back into the Draken Riders along with another flank charge from more slaves, and then I pick up this loot token with these slaves, so I'm sitting on 2 loot tokens to my opponent's 0. And yeah, that's the action shot. The Draken Riders were sitting on 4 wounds again because my if we roll a picture back, you can see this is the final placement of the death engine. So it did end up doing 4 wounds to them on the way out. And yeah, here's another double 1. So I made a slight joke because I've got this weapon team. I shoot into the ASB with the loot, just trying to knock the inspire off these guys. And so I roll 5 wounds, I double 1 it, I take a picture, and I tell my opponent, well, now we're both on the same page, right? Like, it's not a dice game. But yeah, and here's what it looks like at the end. The Draken Riders are pretty easily dealt with. I do end up getting the Corn Dog of Glory onto the Blight, so it got crushed 2. So 30 attacks on 4s and 3s on those already wounded Draken Riders. Still pretty good that I one round him, but I do. And this is the end of the turn as my opponent concedes, and I go, that seems fair, because all he's got are the 2 ASBs right here, the Centaur Chief over here fighting against a claw shot, and this wizard with heal 6, and I've got my entire army, or not my entire army, but a lot of rats still left, right? So none of them are facing these individuals, so that's good, but I still have some shooting in these 2 units, so not the prettiest. But that's the end of the game. I end up getting a 2-0 victory for loot, and then the attrition score is actually a lot closer than you would think. Just because playing rats, you're gonna bleed bodies, you're gonna lose a lot of attrition points, but that's sort of what's fun about them. And that's the end of the report. So I hope you guys liked it, and until next time, bye.